Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another Dhamma session here at Empty Cloud Monastery. So today we have with us Ayya Soma, so our beloved resident bhikkhuni, and myself, Bhante Sudaso. So we'll be starting with a short period of meditation. Then after the meditation, we'll have a bit of discussion around a sutta. So a sutta on the theme that we've been doing lately, on the topic of Dhamma for householders. So we have the script, the link to the sutta script being posted now, so you can follow along once we start. First, however, please go ahead and get in meditation position. So starting by settling into a stable, upright position. Taking a few long, slow, deep breaths. To settle your body and mind. You can forget about the past, forget about the future. Let yourself forget everything except the present moment. And even in the present moment, forget who you think you are. Forget your nationality, your gender, your race, your age, your weight, your height. Forget your personality. Forget your habits. Forget your preferences. Just bring your mind into a full, intimate, direct contact with this moment. This moment of bodily sensation, this moment of awareness. Giving complete, non-reactive attention with a motionless body and a motionless mind. To this complete, indivisible moment. In this intimate, direct contact with the present moment, there's no room for concepts, no room for identities, no room for anything at all except this immediate, tangible experience of body-mind, this ever-changing moment of direct contact. This direct, intimate contact with reality consumes the complete attention of your entire body-mind. So you can release your posture.
Right, thank you, Bhante, for guiding us in meditation, and welcome to all of our friends here joining in tonight, our residents here at Empty Cloud Monastery, of course, and our friends Rick, Kumu, Deborah, Mary, Sean of Label, Paolo, Patricia, Victor, Michael, York, Mary, Amaranta. Good to see you all, friends, for checking in, and also anyone else who's watching but hasn't said hello yet. So earlier on in the links, we posted the link to the sutta that we were going to be reading this evening and discussing together. So the sutta is Anguttara Nikaya 825, the Mahanama Sutta. And do you want to start, Bhante, reading it, and then we'll discuss it as we go?
Yeah, if you wish.
Great, thank you.
So this is, the sutta begins, it says, on one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling among the Sakyans at Kaplavatu in the banyan tree park. Then Mahanama the Sakyan approached the Blessed One, paid homage to him, sat down to one side, and said to him, "In what way, Bhante, is one a lay follower?" And the Buddha replies, "When, Mahanama, one has gone for refuge to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, in that way one is a lay follower." And the Buddha asks, "In what way, Bhante, is a lay follower virtuous?" And the Buddha replies, "When, Mahanama, a lay follower abstains from the destruction of life, from taking what is not given, from sexual misconduct, from false speech, and from liquor, wine, and intoxicants, the basis for heedlessness. In that way, a lay follower is virtuous." Maybe we can say a few words about that.
Sure. Well, I mean, it starts with essentially, defining what a Buddhist is. So when do we become a Buddhist? So there are a lot of, especially in the West, actually only in the West that I'm aware of, a lot of different definitions of what qualifies as being a Buddhist. But it was very interesting because once we were in a room with a lot of different convert Buddhists who all had different kind of ideas of what it meant to be a Buddhist. And then we had some friends who were all born in Buddhist countries. I remember one friend from Laos, one friend from Sri Lanka, one friend from Vietnam, and another friend from another Buddhist country. And so at a certain point, I was like, what is your definition of being a Buddhist? And they all had exactly the same definition, which is the one that we found here in the in this sutta. So taking refuge in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, and following the precepts, which is essentially the 5 precepts you'll see at any Buddhist temple. There is not really anything going on unless people take refuge in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha and follow the 5 precepts. So it was really actually interesting to see how there was no doubt, no kind of debate of what it meant to be a Buddhist. You were there too, Bhante, do you remember? Yeah. As opposed to the converts all had, I mean, somewhat, sometimes they would there were some parts that were overlapping with this definition, but a lot of times people would start philosophizing, oh, the Buddha never created Buddhism, so there's no such thing as a Buddhist. And well, you can like the Buddha and maybe a bit of the Dhamma, but the Sangha, we can toss it out or rephrase it, rename it. So it's interesting.
There are also different ideas about what it means to take refuge in Dhamma. So a lot of convert Buddhists have this idea that you can rewrite the Dhamma to fit your own ideas, or that you can pick and choose which parts of the Dhamma you want to accept and which parts you want to reject. But again, I clearly remember the conversation that Ayya Soma was talking about. Also because each of the people from Buddhist cultures also had the idea that the Dhamma itself was not subject to modification. That taking refuge in Dhamma meant that you accepted that the Dhamma was the Dhamma, not rewriting it to fit your own ideas, but rather accepting the Buddha taught something specific and incontrovertible, something undeniable, something unmodifiable. And taking refuge in Dhamma meant having a sense of the importance of learning and preserving and trying to follow those teachings. And again, also this emphasis on the 5 precepts as the basis of the virtue of a lay follower. So the 5 precepts are they are a central component of most Theravada Buddhist ceremonies, but they're not just meant to be something ceremonial. They're meant to be a guideline for how we live our lives, a way that we avoid harmful behaviors, and also a way that we get a deeper understanding of the workings of our own mind. So through taking precepts, we have a constant mirror for our own mental activities, for our urges and impulses and desires, and we have the chance to restrain ourselves and to come to a deeper understanding of what's going on in our own mind. Okay, do you want to carry on with the sutta? Or any other thoughts?
No, I think we've covered it, and maybe we can, if you want to read the next part, Bhante.
Okay. Then the sutta continues. So Mahanama asked the Buddha, he says, in what way, Bhante, is a lay follower practicing for his own welfare, but not for the welfare of others? And the Buddha says, when, Mahanama, a lay follower is himself accomplished in faith, but does not encourage others to accomplish faith. When he is himself accomplished in virtuous behavior, but does not encourage others to accomplish virtuous behavior. When he is himself accomplished in generosity, but does not encourage others to accomplish generosity. When he himself wants to see bhikkhus, and presumably bhikkhunis as well, but does not encourage others to see bhikkhus and presumably bhikkhunis. When he himself wants to hear the good Dhamma, but does not encourage others to hear the good Dhamma. When he himself retains in mind the teachings he has heard, but does not encourage others to retain the teachings in mind. When he himself examines the meaning of the teachings that have been retained in mind, but does not encourage others to examine their meaning. When he himself has understood the meaning and the Dhamma and practices in accordance with the Dhamma, but does not encourage others to do so. It is in this way, Mahanama, that a lay follower is practicing for his own welfare, but not for the welfare of others.
Well, just a few words about the bhikkhus part. So Pali is very similar to Latin, which is very similar to Italian, which derives from Latin, and Latin derives from Pali, I seem to understand, or from a common language, because the structure is very similar. So we have the generic masculine whenever we refer to both genders, then the default is the masculine. So a lot of translators come from Anglo-Saxon countries, like Venerable Body, actually, the translation that we're reading right now. So sometimes that is lost in translation because in English, usually there is, there's either, for example, brothers and sisters, or you say siblings, which is the generic. As opposed to in Italian, there's only brothers and sisters. And if there's brothers and sisters together, you would say brothers. So that is why in the suttas, we find a lot of masculine emphasis. It's not that actually only the men were present. It's just that it's intended. It's sottinteso, how do you say?
It's just the nature of the language. So it's implied.
Implied.
So when the masculine plural is used, it's implied that that also includes people of other genders.
Yeah. So I always felt included. By getting to the details of the sutta, it's very interesting how, and we'll see in the paragraph after this, where the Buddha says how is a lay follower practicing for his own welfare and for the welfare of others. So essentially here, there's an emphasis also on compassion and how this practice is beneficial for ourselves and for others. And ultimately, it's fully complete when it's beneficial for ourselves and others. But the Buddha also highlights how it can be something that is good for us. And he specifies exactly how we can go about that. So we see that someone is accomplished in faith, but does not encourage others to accomplish faith. Actually, I see that sometimes in some friends who are from Buddhist countries and have children than in the West, and for different reasons or the others, might not share the full completion, the Buddhist teachings in its full essence, in its full, how do you say? Completeness. Yeah, thank you very much. And so their faith in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha is very strong. But perhaps they don't encourage others, their immediate others, perhaps their significant other, or their children, or other people that surround them in establishing them in accomplishing them in faith. Do you have any thoughts on faith, Bhante?
You can keep going.
Okay, same thing for virtuous behavior. So perhaps we can take, the 5 precepts ourselves, but not encourage others to take them. That is actually very common when we are definitely, for example, when I was when I had first started practicing Buddhism, and in particular, once I actually took refuge in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha and the 5 precepts, and it was not optional breaking the precepts anymore, or optional taking the precepts, however I wanted to see it. And I was still, hanging out with a lot of friends from my previous life within this life. Perhaps I was, if not accomplished in virtuous behavior, I was definitely following virtuous behavior, but I was definitely surrounded by people who were not. Definitely all my friends like to not take the 5th precept. Even my current lay friends, Buddhist lay friends, that seems like a popular one, right? That people take the 5 precepts at the temple and then downgrade to 4 as soon as they leave.
Or sometimes 3.
Well, but anyway, that's better than 0. But yeah, so that could be a situation where we are practicing, but the people around us aren't really on the same page, and we make no effort to establish them in virtue. Similar with generosity, perhaps we can go to the temple and offer lots of food, but not really share the blessings of dana, the blessings of letting go by giving with our fellow companions. I think actually as a layperson, I somewhat was quote unquote guilty of that behavior too. So we can be very focused on our own practice, only on what we're doing, and then going, oh, well, whatever everyone else is doing, it doesn't really matter. But actually, when you see friends, we have lately at the monastery, a lot of friends from Thailand, a lot of friends from Sri Lanka are coming, and it's so a joy. They never feel like ashamed to tell others to participate in giving or to participate in the dana. Quite the opposite, there's always so much effort in making sure that everybody can participate as much as they can. And it's a very joyful and beautiful activity. So we see that each one of our lay friends, like they practice for themselves and others, rather than going like, oh, okay, well, I really like to give this to the monks, or I really like to give this to my friends in Dhamma, or I'd like to give this to whatever it is. But who cares about what everybody else is doing? So Bhante, would you like to add something about faith,
keep going.
virtue,
I'll
and
talk once
generosity?
we've gone through more of the sequence.
Okay.
Because I like how the whole sequence fits together.
Yep. Also going to see the Sangha, so of monastics, but not encouraging others to see monastics. And I mean, I think it's kind of similar. Actually, I've seen a parallel with what I was talking about in terms of dana. So having more of a, a solitary practice, or a solitary, more individual way of approaching the study of the Dhamma, the practice of the Dhamma.
Yeah, so kind of the flip side of this is, for example, we have had a number of lay friends who they come to the monastery regularly to see the monastics and to offer food and supplies to the Sangha. And they're always bringing new friends. Like every time they come, they're bringing a new friend, someone that they want to come and see the monastics and practice generosity with them. So that's something which is really beautiful. So making the effort to, encourage other people to do what is good, to do what is beneficial. And sometimes there's this idea especially in Western convert Buddhism, this idea like, oh, Buddhism is not evangelical, therefore we shouldn't make any effort to encourage other people to practice Buddhism. But actually, you don't find this sentiment in the suttas at all. In fact, in the suttas, it's quite clearly laid out that we should be encouraging other people to practice sila, samadhi, and panya. We should be encouraging other people to understand the Dhamma and practice the Dhamma. We should be encouraging other people to appreciate the Sangha. We should be doing what we can to get other people in our lives to become better people. So you can call it whatever you like, but it does ultimately come down to this fact that if you want people to be happy, it's important to give them the tools of happiness. And the Dhamma is the most powerful tool for happiness that we have. Which actually leads directly into the next item on this list. So you might notice also that these items, there's clearly a sequence involved, how each item naturally leads to the next. So the first one is faith. So when you have faith in the Dhamma, then you want to follow its instructions. Then based on faith, one practices virtue, morality. If you don't have any faith, then morality doesn't make any sense. It just seems like a bunch of arbitrary restrictions. But when you have faith in the Dhamma, then following the instructions of found in the Dhamma makes sense to you. It seems reasonable. So practicing morality and generosity, and then going to see monastics. So going to see those who have a deep commitment to the Dhamma. And that then naturally follows to the fifth item on this list, which is one who wants to hear the good Dhamma. So the Pali for this is sad Dhamma, which can mean either good Dhamma or true Dhamma. So one wants to hear the good Dhamma, and in this section of the sutta, it's saying one wants to hear the good Dhamma, but does not encourage others to hear the good Dhamma. So again, this is somebody who makes an effort to go and visit the monastics and listen to the Dhamma, but they don't make any effort to encourage other people to do the same. They don't encourage other people to come and listen to the Dhamma. So again, this is pointing to the fact that there is value in encouraging other people to learn the Dhamma. And it's also pointing to this sequence, how through developing faith, committing oneself to practicing morality and generosity, then taking the time to go and see the monastics. So that appreciation for Sangha, which also gives you the opportunity to learn more of the Dhamma, to deepen your understanding and appreciation of the Dhamma. Okay?
Yeah, perfect.
Want to carry on from there?
Well, no, you can carry on.
And the next one is retaining in mind the teachings. So that's another important point. There's a very amusing discourse about the deva named Sakka, who goes to listen to a Dhamma talk by the Buddha and then immediately forgets. So one of the other monks, Venerable Mahamoggallana, goes and asks Sakka, like, oh, what was that Dhamma talk the Buddha just gave you? And he's like, I forget. But come, let me show you all my wonderful things. And Venerable Mahamoggallana encourages him to pay more attention to the Buddha's teachings. But the point of that is it's pointing to the fact of how easily we forget. And this is something which is quite noticeable in our lives. And usually it's because we fill our mind with so many other things. So yeah, you listen to a Dhamma talk and you're like, oh, that was pretty good. But then you start binge watching your favorite TV show or chatting about sports with your friends or whatever it is people do with their time. I don't know. What do lay people do with their time?
The phone.
Scrolling endlessly through Facebook or Instagram or whatever. TikTok, is that the popular one these days?
I think so.
I've never even seen TikTok, but I hear it's popular. But yeah, just constantly distracting ourselves with a bunch of useless non-Dhamma information. And very quickly we forget the Dhamma. So it's important not just to learn the Dhamma, but to make a conscious effort to retain it in mind. So that doesn't just mean remembering it, it means keeping it. So the Pali word here is dharana. So dharana means to carry, to hold, to bear something, to maintain something. So to constantly hold the Dhamma in mind, keep the Dhamma in mind. So constantly reminding yourself of the Dhamma and keeping it in your mind as you go throughout your day. And here, of course, it's saying not just to do that for yourself, but also to encourage the people around you to retain the Dhamma in mind, not to drop the Dhamma and replace it with other useless noise. And then that naturally leads to the next one. So it says, when one examines the meanings of the teachings that have been retained in mind, but does not encourage others to examine their meaning. So when we learn the Dhamma, it's important also to think deeply about it, to really reflect deeply on the implications, the meaning of what's being said, to really deeply consider how the Dhamma leads to awakening and how we can use the Dhamma as a roadmap for awakening. So it's not enough just to memorize a bunch of Dhamma facts. So if I'm like, quiz time, how many factors of awakening are there? Well, you might be able to answer. You might be able to answer. One of the monastery residents was whispering the answer. You might be able to answer, but that's beside the point if you don't know in detail what each of those factors of awakening are, what they mean, and how to develop them in your own mind. in such a way that you can progress towards awakening. So we don't learn the Dhamma in order to pass quizzes or to win at arguments. We learn the Dhamma so that we can develop the qualities of mind that lead to awakening, which may or may not make you better at debates and quizzes. And then, so then that naturally leads to the next one. The next one is one who has understood the meaning and the Dhamma and practices in accordance with the Dhamma, but does not encourage others to do so. So again, it's we encourage others to reflect on the meaning of the Dhamma. That's what we should be doing. So we reflect on the meaning ourselves, and we also encourage others to reflect on the meaning. But then once we understand the Dhamma, we should also make a sincere effort to practice accordingly. So for example, you hear that all things are not self, and you're like, okay, that's cute. Let me get on with my day. And you're like, no, wait a minute. I should really reflect deeply. What does this mean? When the Buddha says all things are impersonal, nothing is me or mine, nothing whatsoever should be clung to. All self-identity should be abandoned. What does the Buddha mean by these things? So we reflect deeply on it. And then we think, well, I need to actually apply this to my life. I need to learn how to stop taking things personally. I need to release my grip on self-identity. I need to examine what my self-identity is so that I can release my grip on it, so that I can stop taking myself seriously. So this is practicing in accordance with the Dhamma, which is only possible if you've examined the meaning of the Dhamma, which is only possible if you're holding the Dhamma in mind, which is only possible if you heard the Dhamma in the first place, which is only possible if you've gone to learn from well-practiced monastics. And you're only likely to do that if you already have a good foundation of morality and a solid basis of faith. So you can see how all 8 of the items in the sequence naturally build upon each other and eventually culminate in practicing in accordance with Dhamma. And in this formulation, the Buddha is pointing out that there are people who they do practice well themselves, but they don't make any effort to encourage other people to develop the factors of the path that eventually lead to practicing the Dhamma in accordance with the Dhamma. So what he's pointing to is that this is an incomplete way to be a lay follower, an insufficient way of being a lay follower. But in the next paragraph, he gives the complete practice of a lay follower. Do you want to read this one?
Well, it's exactly the same as before, except for the fact that one encourages others to accomplish faith, encourages others to accomplish virtuous behavior, encourages others to accomplish generosity, encourages others to see monastics, encourages others to hear the good Dhamma, encourages others to retain the teachings in mind, encourages others to examine their meaning, and then they themselves understand the meaning of the meaning and the Dhamma, and then practice in accordance with the Dhamma, and also encourage others to practice in accordance with the Dhamma. In this way, one is practicing for their own welfare and for the welfare of others.
It's also interesting here that here the Buddha gives only 2 options. Commonly, this would be given in the form of the tetralemma. So someone who's practicing neither for their own benefit nor the benefit of others. So that'd be somebody who's not doing any of these things, as well as not encouraging others to do so. Then someone who practices for their own benefit but not others, as we saw. Then someone who practices for the benefit of others but not themselves. This is mentioned in a few suttas. So someone who tells other people, oh, you should have faith and practice morality and generosity, and you should go and hear the Dhamma and practice it, and all these things. But then they don't do any of that themselves. So I've certainly encountered quite a number of people like that as well. People who are like, oh, you should be virtuous. And it's like, have you looked in a mirror lately? You might find you're a little bit short in the qualities that you're preaching to others. And then, of course, the final one is the second example the Buddha gives here: someone who is practicing for their own welfare and for the welfare of others. So they both make a sincere effort to cultivate a full and complete practice within themselves, and they also make a sincere effort to encourage others to do the same. And commonly, when the Buddha gives these lists, he'll also say that the highest person is the one who practices both for their own benefit and the benefit of others. So we see that in many other discourses, where the Buddha emphasizes that to practice only for your own benefit is incomplete, it's insufficient. That the highest practice is to practice, the most complete practice is to practice both for one's own benefit and the benefit of others. Okay.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
I just actually I am always amazed to see how, a lot of our friends who, once again, are born Buddhist, and perhaps do not know these suttas in the way that they haven't studied them, but actually they embody them. So it's embedded in the culture, it's embedded in their minds. So it's second nature. So there is no kind of, it's almost effortless in a way. I'm thinking about, all our friends like come to the temple. So that's why it's also extremely important for anyone who starts practicing the path to make sure to set roots in a temple, in a Buddhist temple, with people who are born Buddhist, so one can absorb this, and then there's not that much difficulty and there's not that much resistance either. And actually, I think we can pass on, go to the questions, because I think that actually Sud's, for example, question somewhat is on topic on what I'm talking about here. So Sud says, "Dear Venerable, how does one practice for the benefit of oneself and others without risking proselytizing? Especially when you're not born Buddhist and you're like an island." Yeah, so I think the reason why I'm saying that this is related is because we can get very much like that when we are starting our Buddhist practice, and if we don't have other practitioners that are very enthusiastic about the practice, then it seems very forceful. It seems unnatural to talk about Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. It seems unnatural to establish ourselves in faith, and let alone others in faith. But instead, once again, if I'm thinking, for example, our friend Marky, that all of our residents here have met. She essentially does this every single day, all 8 steps. And she's able to do it with every single person that crosses the door of the monastery or outside the monastery. And she's not proselytizing. It's very different from actually, say, an evangelical person of the religions that we're normally used to in the West. That where there is that intention. Okay, well, I have this, this perhaps truth. I guess people might perceive it as truth, and I think that you need to, this will save you, so you have to do it, right? We can become very, people can be very intense when it comes to that. But instead, actually, we do it usually with unwholesome things, We're like, oh, yeah, there's this awesome bar that you should come to, or like, there's a sale next door. We don't feel like we're proselytizing people when we are encouraging them in practicing greed, hatred, and delusion. So Marky, I think, our friend Marky, when she is sharing the Dhamma with others, or encouraging others to practice in this way, she doesn't think about it in terms of like, oh, these people are on a wrong path and I should make sure that they don't go to hell, but rather she's enthusiastic experientially about Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. So she naturally shares it with anyone she is interacting with. So then these qualities are naturally flourishing in her mind, and are contagious for others too, because we always want, what makes other people happy. Right? Or like, oh, that's very inspiring. She looks like someone who's really happy. I want to be happy too. Oh yeah, okay. So Marky is giving a lot. I want to give a lot. Marky likes to do devotional things by the Buddha statue. Oh, I want to do devotional things by the Buddha statue. Perhaps I don't even like flowers, but actually now I like flowers because Marky is inspiring me to put flowers by the Buddha statue. So this is how, we work on ourselves, and then automatically that, that kind of seeps through others as well, naturally. So these are some thoughts, but I don't know if Bhante, you have.
That's good. Yeah, maybe we can see what other questions there are as well.
All right. And PCBM tutor says, would you explain me if Buddhist monks can live at one monastery together? Well, clearly they can, since we live in a monastery together.
Yeah, it's actually, there's nothing in the Vinaya that prohibits bhikkhus and bhikkhunis from living in the same monastery. And in fact, if you look in the suttas, and especially in the Vinaya, there's many cases where it's quite clear that it was a common practice at the time of the Buddha for bhikkhus and bhikkhunis to live close together, and even in the same monastery. And also throughout Buddhist history, in every country that Buddhism has been in, it's also been a common practice for bhikkhus and bhikkhunis to live in the same monastery. So I actually don't know where the idea comes from that they shouldn't. Like, there's no basis for it that I can find anywhere in the Vinaya, in the suttas, or in Buddhist history. So I don't know where the idea comes from that they shouldn't live in the same monastery.
Yeah, we have a lovely precept that we can't do the laundry for bhikkhus. So it would be very difficult to do the laundry for bhikkhus if we lived in a separate monastery.
Yeah, so this gives you a sense already that clearly they were living close enough together that this would come up in the first place.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have a precept. I'm not supposed to make bhikkhunis do my laundry for me. So that would be terribly hard to come up if they were living in a completely different monastery on the other side of the city.
Yeah, yeah, it doesn't come up with other bhikkhunis, does it? And Undone asks, is it okay to try to help others with the 5 precepts without mentioning Buddhist terms? Yes, of course. Yeah, you don't have to use Buddhist terms in order.
Yeah, morality makes you happy. This is something which, again, it doesn't really matter whether somebody is Buddhist or not. If you're kind and friendly and generous and compassionate and kind, if you're helpful and gentle to others, then that makes you happy. And it makes other people like you more. So that's like a little bonus to all of this, by the way. So you don't necessarily need to talk about Buddhism in order to encourage other people to practice kindness and compassion and goodness. Yeah.
And Sud says, can establishing your friends in generosity or loving kindness or honesty without mentioning the Buddha still the same as establishing others in Dhamma? Depends on how you do it. But once again, if the principles are there, I always like to give credit to the Buddha. I think it's actually good karma to give credit to the Buddha. But there are certain circumstances where perhaps saying the name of the Buddha or Buddhism can be triggering for the people that you're interacting with. My parents would be an example of that, because they're not particularly happy about the fact that I'm a Buddhist monk. So if I even dare starting a sentence like, oh, in Buddhism, we do this, or the Buddha said to do that, they will, not hang up the phone on me, but definitely shut down immediately. So yeah, absolutely. Speaking about the Dhamma, the Dhamma is truth, so you can talk about the theory of relativity without having to mention Einstein. So those principles are true. And then that can actually be, sort of a doorway in the hearts of people that can listen with perhaps more interest without creating pre-existing barriers, like putting up pre-existing barriers, and like feeling a little bit more relaxed and opening up. And then once they're ready, then we can perhaps share our sources and go, well, by the way, actually, this is not, coming from my brilliant mind, but the brilliant mind of an awakened being 2,500 years ago in ancient India. And before him, multiple Buddhas, and also in the future, multiple Buddhas. It's just the way things are. Shadow of Label says, are you saying laity have to abstain from beer?
Yes.
Honestly, beer is overrated. I used to drink a lot as a lay practitioner, and actually not as a lay practitioner, as a lay person. And then I became a practitioner and I stopped drinking because I realized, I was trying to establish mindfulness, and then doing one step forward and 5 steps backwards, it was just really not sustainable. So I stopped drinking for a period of time. And then actually my friends were giving me a hard time for the fact that I was not drinking. I'm really grateful for them because they actually gave me the good push to I'm a little contrarian. So like peer pressure does the opposite for me. I was like, okay. And now I'll take them for life. And it was wonderful. At a certain point, I was like, why on earth did I spend so many years intoxicated? Like, what a waste of time. Like, you start realizing the stupid conversations you have when you're drunk. Well, maybe you don't realize your stupid conversation, but you realize everybody else's conversations, the people that you really like. And, you remember them when they're sober. And then you remember you had a lot of fun with them when they were drunk, and you were drunk too. And then at a certain point, you're not drunk anymore. You're like, actually, this is really lame. So actually, I recommend for everybody to take a period of sobriety and hang out do everything that you normally do while sober. You'll have a different perspective. And then it's actually not a temptation anymore. You're like, I really want to do something else with my life. And so, then it's not.
And coming back to Buddhism, again, remember that we're trying to develop Sila, Samadhi, and Panya. And alcohol develops the exact opposite of that. So alcohol is a wonderful way of bringing you in exactly the opposite direction of awakening. So yeah, absolutely. It is something which we need to train ourselves away from. And of course, this doesn't apply just to alcohol. It also applies to other intoxicants. These days, we've got quite a large menu to choose from. But anything which reduces our mindfulness, weakens our self-restraint, disrupts our concentration, damages our wisdom, anything like that, we need to stay away from. Because it's not doing us any good, and it's only causing us harm.
Amaranta says, I'm a teacher living in a Christian country, and for years I never showed my religion until I decided to get out of the closet. Still, it's difficult for me. I don't want to be disrespectful or stigmatized. It's so funny because actually when I had to tell my parents that I was a Buddhist and I was, that I had ordained actually as a samaneri, because you don't need the permission of your parents to ordain as a samaneri. So I told them afterwards. But there was a month where I was basically living in disguise, so nobody was allowed to take pictures of me and post them. And then I was talking to my friends who are gay from back home, and they were like, wow, it's really so similar to when we had to come out. I was terrified to tell my parents, rightly so. They were actually quite shocked and had a really strong reaction. So yeah, it's hard, but we do also what is hard to do. And yeah, I mean, part of this practice is developing that fearlessness.
Mm.
And this, on the degree of fearfulness, it's actually pretty small. There's lots of other things that we have there's more fear towards, and they're more kind of bigger obstacles. So yeah, this we need to push ourselves and just embrace the path, embrace our new wholesome identity, actually, because this is a wholesome identity that we need to have, we need to hold on to until we reach the other shore, and then we can let go of this precious identity of either lay follower or ordained follower. So yeah, you don't need to be disrespectful. Or you mean disrespected. I don't want to be disrespected or stigmatized, right? You think that's what she means, Maranta?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, disrespected. I mean, you're also going to be disrespected by Buddhist people. So prepare, Amaranta. People are people, whether they're Buddhist or not Buddhist, whether they're Christian or not Christian, whether they're Muslim or not Muslim. Like, people come in all flavors, shapes, and forms. So not necessarily if someone identifies as a particular religion, they will actually follow the religion. Not necessarily if they think they're following the religion, they will understand the religion they're following. So yeah, we can't really base our actions on praise, honor, and gain. Yeah. Prepare yourself to be disrespected and stigmatized, so then you will never be disappointed. That's what, I do as a female monk. I'm like, all right, the expectation is to be disrespected and stigmatized. Oh, great. Today I wasn't disrespected nor stigmatized. What an awesome day. Rather than the other way around. Otherwise, so much dukkha. We already have enough dukkha. Oh, we have a lot of questions that popped down. Okay.
Maybe we should go a little quicker.
Yeah. Malcolm Canute says, when one wants to practice or rather practices and finds that they fail at adhering to certain precepts, what's the best remedy? How does one re-engage with the practice when they feel they have strayed? Svante?
Well, first off, one thing that I would encourage you is to recollect the precepts that you have been keeping. It's pretty rare that somebody follows all 5 precepts and then one day they break all 5 of them in one day. That's relatively rare. Usually it's 1 or 2 that they slip up on. So you reflect. It's like, well, okay, yeah, I had some drinks today and that wasn't good. But I've been pretty good at not killing things. I've been pretty good at not stealing things. I haven't cheated on my partner today. Haven't told any lies. Well, maybe bent the truth a few times, but not too bad. So you recollect. It's like, actually, I'm not completely, utterly, totally horrible. I actually do have a certain commitment to precepts. And I do have the desire to have an even stronger commitment to precepts. I have the intention to keep the precepts really well. So it's reflecting that you've actually developed some goodness in yourself. You're not 100% horrible. You've actually got a fair amount of goodness in you already. You've got at least the aspiration to keep the precepts well, and you probably actually keep at least some of them relatively well most of the time. So focus on what you're doing well, and that will help to encourage you to get better at the ones you're not doing so well on. And also forgive yourself, because remember, this is really hard. Buddhism is not easy. It's really hard. but it brings so much happiness and serenity and blessings into our life that it's worth doing it, even though it's hard. Okay?
Great, thank you, Bante. And Sam asks, after learning this sutta, is it same with what Mahayana always is talking about, the Bodhisattva path, to realize the Dhamma yourself and also help others to realize the Dhamma? Yes, I would say absolutely. Yes, the more you study the suttas and the more you study Mahayana, the more you see that actually they're essentially saying the same thing, except for here and there that there obviously is some doctrinal shifts, but the practice is the same. And essentially, there is no distinction between self and others. So by helping others, you help yourself, and by helping yourself, you help others. So if you want to call it the Bodhisattva path, you want to take the Bodhisattva vows, and that helps you, then great. If you just want to call it the path, which is usually what I call it, that's great too. So do whatever works, but essentially, yeah, do all these steps, and you're going in the right direction. And Sudza says, can Dhamma be found in other religions? For example, honest Christian, non-alcoholic Muslim, etc., etc. I would say the simile that the Buddha gives, maybe of the elephant.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So the Buddha gives the simile of the elephant and of blind men touching the elephant. And so one man will say, the elephant is the trunk, the elephant is the foot, the elephant is the tail, the elephant is the tusk, whatever it is that they're touching. And so, yeah, actually the elephant, the tusk is part of the elephant, the trunk is part of the elephant. So the Buddhist perspective is that essentially the Dhamma is the full elephant, and different traditions will have a glimpse of the elephant, and that is definitely the Dhamma, but the complete picture is only found ultimately by the Buddha. And PCBM Tutor says, all the religions say the same loving kindness to others, right? If I say all the religions tell the same good manners, would you agree with me?
Not quite. So as Ayya Soma just said, many spiritual traditions have glimpses of parts of the Dhamma, but the complete Dhamma is only found in Buddhism. So it's quite risky. If we start saying all religions are saying the same thing, well, that's actually not a true statement. But if you say that there are certain messages which are similar in many different traditions, that would be a true statement. So we need to be careful what we say. If we say, oh, it's all the same, well, that's not true. But if we say there are certain similarities in certain messages across different traditions, then that is a true statement.
And Scott says, in my experience, eventually a healthy fear of intoxicants can be developed. Sure, if that works, why not? I have a healthy disinterest of intoxicants now.
Well, Maury, for me, it's really appreciating a clear mind.
Yeah.
It's really appreciating sharpness and precision, which is only possible with a sober mind.
And Sud says, do you think one needs a storehouse of good karma prior to having a strong belief in Dhamma or even having capacity to understand? Absolutely, yes, which I think is why actually Sila and Dana is emphasized so much in traditional Buddhism, is to, well, reinforce, add on to the good karma that you're already accumulated, especially if you're born in a Buddhist country, like big bonus points. Should rejoice in your previous good deeds, and if not, to actually create the conditions in order to to have good soil where you can then plant the seeds and the seeds can grow. Essentially, that is what good karma is having a good soil, fertile soil. So we all have the soil that we have. So without worrying too much of what we've done in the past, what we can do is exactly kamma. Kamma means actually action. Let's remember that a lot of times we use this word in terms of vipaka, which is results of previous kamma. But right now we can make kamma. Actually, it's the only thing we can do right now. Kamma, kamma, good kamma, good kamma, good kamma, good kamma. Sometimes we do bad kamma, but then you're like, okay, wait, good kamma. So let's build a storehouse now. And Andan says, how does marijuana or shrooms come into play? Is it possible to use things like psilocybin,
the active ingredient in mushrooms,
to better a state of mind, Bante?
So that's quite risky because while some people do report having spiritual experiences while under the influence of psychedelics, usually it's accompanied by a lot of confusion. It's accompanied by a very chaotic and blurry and distorted mind state, which makes it very difficult to gain any genuine wisdom. And even if you do have some kind of temporary blurry wisdom while under that altered state of mind, it fades. So when the drug clears out of your system, then that temporary, blurry, chaotic, confusing semi-wisdom also fades away. So it's not a reliable way of making genuine progress on the spiritual path. There are many people who, when they really don't have any clue what spirituality is, they take some substances like that and they get some, again, this blurry, hazy glimpse that there's something more important to life. And that sometimes can inspire someone to set out in pursuit of genuine Dhamma. So there's many, many stories of people like that who they have some psychedelic experience that inspires them to begin Buddhist practice. Or if they're already Buddhist, it inspires them to get serious about their practice. But after that point, these things are not useful. They will only make your mind chaotic and confusing and messy. You do need to set these things aside and commit to practicing the Noble Eightfold Path if you want to make genuine progress.
Thank you, Bante. PCBM Tutors asks, how many precepts are there for monks and nuns? Are there more than 10? Well, first of all, here at Empty Cloud, we don't use the Christian term nuns, but we use bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, or we use monk as gender neutral to translate for those who don't know what a bhikkhu or bhikkhuni is. And the precepts are 227 and 311. And
we also have thousands of minor rules as well, which are shared between bhikkhus and bhikkhunis. So there's a lot. So the 10 precepts are common for novices. So when people are in the early stages of training, then they usually follow only 10. So much simpler set of rules. But after one has had some initial training, then one takes on the deeper commitment to hundreds of major rules and thousands of minor ones. Then life gets really interesting.
And Future One had this question: why do monks wear their wardrobe over one shoulder instead of draping it over their whole back and both shoulders? Maybe I
mean, we're kind of wandering off the topic of the sutta, more or less.
Well, since we don't have
okay.
monk chat this week, we're being kind.
Okay, so the practice of wearing the robe over one shoulder with the other shoulder exposed, and actually traditionally it would be fully exposed. We just wear these jackets in the winter because it's cold. But in warmer weather, the right shoulder and right arm are completely exposed. So this is a custom from ancient India of showing respect. So when someone was in the presence of a respected spiritual teacher or in the presence of royalty, then they would expose their right shoulder and right arm. So this has been preserved in Buddhist tradition. So since the time of the Buddha. So this is the instruction that's given in the Vinaya for both bhikkhus and bhikkhunis to expose the right shoulder and right arm. And we only completely cover our body when we're going into a city. But in the monastery, normally we keep the right shoulder and right arm exposed. And especially when we're in the presence of a Buddha shrine or a senior monk, then you always have the right shoulder and right arm open.
Unless it's really cold, like right now in New Jersey,
Yeah.
then we have the non-offense as for otherwise we'll get sick. So we can wear this accoutrement. And so it says, sorry, one last question. Did Mahanama attain enlightenment?
If I remember, he became a non-returner. I would have to look it up, but I'm pretty sure he became a non-returner. I could look it up in DPR, but maybe that's... Well, if you do a quick search online, I'm sure you could find the answer. But as I recall, Mahanama was a non-returner. Do you recall?
In one translation of the sutta, one of the Mahanama suttas by Ajahn Jeff, it says in the commentary he was a once returner.
Once returner, we are told.
Which is a quite remarkable attainment. So that's a once returner is an advanced stream enterer. So someone who's thoroughly established on the path to enlightenment and is guaranteed to attain awakening within, in a once returner's case, within one lifetime.
Great. All right. So that was the last question for tonight. And this will be actually the last time until the end of the month that you will probably see our faces online, as Bhante and I will be leaving for Italy tomorrow, but we'll have many other monastics here that will be sharing Dhamma online. So tomorrow morning we'll have Venerable Vimalagnani, who will be tuning in from Germany. And in the evening, Venerable Sanata Vihari will be tuning in from Los Angeles. And then on Friday, actually, this week, we'll have just a blast from the past. So there will be a talk of Ajahn Punadhammo, if I remember correctly, in the morning, and in the evening, a talk about anger. So you all don't get angry that there's no monk chat. So you can see how you can deal with it with the talk from the past from Bhante at this time. And then next week, Bhante Sumita will be doing some live streams on Friday. So you can tune in for that, as well as monk chat with Bhante Sumita. And yeah, Ayya Palagnani on Wednesday, and lots of other monastics. And if you're around the monastery, every Sunday now in November, we'll have, well, after the meal offering here at Empty Cloud Monastery at 1 p.m., from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m., there will be an afternoon of mindfulness. So you can join us in. And Sam asks, will you broadcast from Italy too? We do not know. Maybe, most likely not, but maybe yes. We will be very, very busy because we're going to lots of different places. Buddhism has apparently exploded a bit in the past 10 years. So that I've been away. So quite curious to meet the groups. But yeah, we might broadcast things. We don't know yet. Okay. But all right, I think that's all. Hope to see you all soon. May you be well and happy. May all good things come to you. And we can end with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.